All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. First off, I just want to thank all of you for making time today. I know asking you to carve out 4 hours during the semester, especially the first week of classes, is not the easiest thing in the world. I also know that some of you have to leave a little early. We have some that are coming a little late, which is why we have some empty spots here. But feel free, if you have to leave early, you can. We are compiling all the information from this, and you will get a full report when we're all done with this, whether you can be here or not. But I do really appreciate all of you making time and being here this morning. Couple of quick announcements. I think everybody saw coffee and waters the back. That's where the lunches will be as well. If you need a restroom and you haven't been over here, they're either out those doors all the way at the end of the hall, or you can go out these doors and turn left. So we build in some breaks, but if you need to go do anything else, feel free. This is a retreat-ish workshop. It is not a formal listen to Tina or me talk the whole time. What I want to do to get started before I give some introductory remarks is just have each of you go around and introduce your name, what college, what department you are. You don't need to say anything about your passions and research because you should have turned in a video that everybody will see here in a few minutes. But if you can do that, we'll start with table 1, we'll go to table 2, we'll go to table 3, and then table 4. So Amanda, you want to start?
Hello, good morning. My name is Carl. I'm a professor of chemistry. I'm also a chemist. Hi, I'm Praveen Walker. I'm the student of architecture and interior design at the College of DAC.
I'm Angela Kochik. I'm in the Department of Philosophy and I direct the Center for Public Engagement with Science.
Patrick Ray, I'm in environmental engineering, which is inside of chemical and environmental engineering in college.
Everybody, my name is Jimmy Jan. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Chemistry, Art and Sciences.
Morning, everyone. Sorry for my internship from chemical and environmental engineering.
Stand up, just name and department.
I'm Morgan from the
And then, Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
Graduate of the university a long time ago, and I retired recently, and I'm trying to get back and help.
And Tina, you.
Good morning. I'm Tina Maley. I'm the director of the Staff Success Center, for Human Resources and Training for Staff. I'm here today to help facilitate that activity. So I'll introduce myself a little bit more when we get started, but thank you all for letting me be here again.
And then we have, you met Heather. You should have met Heather walking in. And then Jared and Kyle are part of the Office of Research. They're in Jennifer Kravicus's area. And Mike Miller is our tech support from DTS. So again, thanks everybody. What I wanted to do before we sort of get into the meat is just sort of tell the story of why we're here today, give you a little bit of background and context. And before I do that, there's the other member. So Jennifer Kravicus from the Office of Research, who oversees all the programming that goes on in this building. But how we got to today really started a couple of years ago when President Pinto announced the acceleration phase of Next Lives Here. And as part of the acceleration phase, he added 2 new focal areas for the urban impact platform and the Urban Futures Pathway in particular. And for those who aren't aware, the Urban Futures Pathway has been overseen by the Office of Research since its inception. So we started with Digital Futures, the building you're in. I think most of you have been in here before. This was UC's first interdisciplinary research facility. It's not a college-based, which all our other research facilities are based in colleges and programmed by colleges. This is the first one that the institution oversees the programming. That's what Jennifer's role has been since its inception. At present, we have over 20 different interdisciplinary research labs in this space. Phase 2 construction is almost complete, so we are expanding the availability for more labs. But what was unique about this building, and part of the name is, this is a dry lab facility. So it supports more computational data-based research. This was not a facility that was ever thought of or designed by the president to be a wet lab facility. But from the moment he and I, and at the time, Provost Nelson, were talking about that, there was always this concept of, this is the first building, there needs to be more. We need to accommodate additional interdisciplinary research, but also provide wet lab capabilities. So bioscience and bioeconomy is the path forward towards that vision for the president. In the biosciences, and I'll describe a little bit more, that is a focus more on the biomedical side of research. The bioeconomy is a catch-all phrase. Some of you may be familiar with it. It goes by many different names, but it really covers the types of activities you all do here, whether it's in the fields of water, around energy, around sustainability, whatever that might be, that was in that bioeconomy piece. And I'm going to use the second thing that happened beyond the president and this bioscience bioeconomy is another alum who wanted to give back, not Jim in this case, but John Michelman, who is an alum of the chemistry department. And some of you may be familiar with the Michelman Chemical Company here in town. He and I started talking about 5 years ago about how he could help support the development of applied research in the fields of green, clean technology. So I think many of you in this room, not all, but many of you are aware, we have the Michelman Awards that we do for internal funding. Several of you have received that internal funding. And the goal there was, again, to spur interdisciplinary research, collaborative research. We do fund single investigators. Harong is an example of a single investigator who's received funding, but we also sort of want to spur the idea of teams doing work together. And the real key there is applied research. And why that's important is because that's the other aspect of Digital Futures. It's all about applied. It's about the problems. It's not what you do, sort of the fundamental research. The fundamental research as we envision it and have shared it with the deans and other leadership, that's what occurs in the departments and in the colleges. But if we're going to have interdisciplinary research facilities, the idea is that's where we can come together, work beyond our discipline, and also work in applied areas. What are these problems? How do we come up with the solutions? You can see some of the pilot projects that have been funded. That's not an exhaustive list, but those have come out of this Michelman funding. And then the third piece is really the complement to Digital Futures, and that's BioFutures. So last May, I went before the UC Board of Trustees to talk to them about what is Digital Futures wet lab complement going to look like. BioFutures is what it is. It's going to be a space, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but ideally, it's going to be located in this same complex next door to Digital Futures, but it will serve as a home for the same types of activities that we're doing in Digital Futures in terms of thinking about applied research, thinking about interdisciplinary, thinking about building out institute centers, big areas that get UC's name known, but have that capability to do it in a wet lab environment. So what are we thinking of? What are the types of things? And part of what we're going to do today is hear from you. We want to hear from you what these opportunities are. Cancer treatment, cures, that bioscience piece I talked about, addiction and mental health, but things around clean water, sanitation, sustainable environmental advances. Those are the types of things that I shared with the Board of Trustees that we could start doing more collectively if we have another space that they would invest in. While it hasn't been approved by the board, they're very excited about the idea. So we're moving forward in terms of developing what a program would look like in that space. That would support the UC Nanobiosciences Research Institute. I will mention what that is on the next slide. It will also have capabilities for outpatient clinical trials, incubator space, wet lab swing space, the leather research lab, which I don't know if anybody knows, we have a leather research lab here at UC, managed by the Office of Research that's located at Center Hill right now. And then the Green Clean Tech Research Institute and affiliated centers, that bioeconomy piece that we're here to talk about today. And the model that we followed is last year about this time, we did the same thing. Tina was here, Heather was here. We brought together faculty in the bioscience areas, and we had this similar kind of retreat. Hear what people are thinking about, identify what opportunity spaces exist for UC, what are some of the gaps that are out there, what are some good models that we can learn from. And from that, we've created this Nanobiosciences Research Institute. If you want to learn more, you can go to the research.uc.edu. There's a steering committee of faculty that have been working with the Office of Research on developing this. They did some pilot funding for this institute. They just identified those awardees last month so they can get that work started. But what we're looking for, sort of from a central administration standpoint, is what are the types of things, if we're going to do green clean tech, that we want to see listed up here? What are going to be those focal areas that we have strengths and we have opportunities to really excel if we can start pulling people together? So with that, you have the agenda in front of you. I'm going to turn it over to Tina next, but really our goal is to learn from you. What are the problems that matter to you? What do you think those big problems are? What are our research opportunities? We're going to do exercises that will help you sort of coalesce around, here's some things we keep hearing over and over. What are some gaps? We could be really good, except we need expertise in this, or we need these capabilities here that we don't have. And if you did your homework, which I hope you did, looking at some of the other institutes that are out there, what makes them successful? What can we learn from them? And from that, at the end, Jennifer and I will work with Jim to sort of compile what we're hearing and sort of tell you what we've heard and then what the next steps will be. But this is the first step along a path, just like it was a year ago for the nanobiosciences. And the idea is start the momentum today. There are more people that were interested in being here than could accommodate it in their schedule. So we're going to, as I mentioned to you all, we will be sharing out all this material and next steps. But with that, I hope you enjoy it. Tina makes it fun. You and John did a good job last year. Everybody was enthusiastic by the time they got out of here. But again, I really appreciate everybody being here, your interest, your participation, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Tina.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you, Kyle, for helping to transition slides. As I just mentioned, I'm Tina Maley. I'm the director of the Staff Success Center. So I just want to say, first off, I do not have the expertise that y'all do in the topic of today, right? My expertise is in the facilitation process. And so our agenda today includes an icebreaker that we're going to do, right? And I want to just tell you, as you're looking at these things, that like, how does this relate to the work? Well, I want us to do an icebreaker to help shift our paradigms, shake off the cobwebs, and really think about the mindset we need to bring in today to really focus on the best outcomes, right? We're gonna then do your Problems That Matter review of videos. We're gonna do a SWOT analysis. I will also tell you, I've got a little background around it. This is not a heavy teaching day, but I wanna make sure we have an equal footing ground. And I don't wanna make assumptions about how expert y'all all are in SWOT analysis. We'll be doing that working lunch, and then of course we'll wrap up with a summary of the day. I just wanna reiterate what Pat said. We do have some breaks scheduled, but like, take care of yourselves. If you need to move, stretch, go get water, whatever it is, please take care of your needs. It will not distract me as a facilitator. All right, so for our icebreaker, I brought some riddles, if you will, to help us challenge our assumptions. So has anybody played the game Mind Trap? No, okay, great. Well, this is not a advertisement for it, but I pulled some of the Mind Trap riddles, and the object of the game is to be the first player to answer, and to answer as many questions as possible. All right, so I'm gonna read a riddle. I'm gonna ask you, if you think you know the answer, to raise your hand, and we're gonna hear from you, all right? I've already told you the riddles, so go in with the mindset of, what are we trying to be tricked on here? All right. First one, therein lies the secret, said Scheming Susie, for you see, there is a 7-letter word in the English language that contains 8 words without rearranging any of its letters. What is the word? I might have started with the hardest one. Now, I want you to think to yourself as you're trying to solve this, are you just going to the entire English language? Or are you thinking about context clues that may be in the riddle themselves? Any guesses? Oh, I love this. Okay. How patient are y'all? Are you ready for the answer? Or anybody want to fathom a guess? Please. Therein is the answer. Yes, thank you so much, Angela. How did you get there? Okay, great. Great. Yes, this is a good warm up, right? Again, that's my first thing too. I usually don't get these riddles the first time. I got to like hear it or read it several times. So it's therein. So I did write down the words that are in there because I couldn't remember them all. So in this word, if you watch, the, there, he, in, rain, her, here, and air. So just to get you warmed up. All right, let's try another one. I've only got 5 of them, so don't stress if you're like, I hate this. Only 5 of them. If you were to take 2 apples from 3 apples, how many would you have? Please. Okay, so this is a great question, right? So you think 3 because there were 3 on the table and you took 2 and it's your table. Right, okay, great. I love that logic. The logic is that you have 2 because you took 2, right? What you take is what you have. Why did that trip anybody up? Why is that complex in any way? Yeah, sometimes we add complexity to things, right? We see and maybe recognize this as a numbers problem, a math problem. And so we think to ourselves, well, obviously it's 3 minus 2, but that's not the question. All right, let's try another one. How many 3-cent stamps are in a dozen? Please. A dozen, in fact, right? Again, the same sort of trick there of you think that we're giving you the information about the cost for a reason. It's superfluous, okay? These are all challenges we may face as we even have these conversations, right? How likely is it that we get caught up on a detail that may not actually matter in the long run, or where we assume kind of the constraints around how we're approaching this? All right, 2 more, I believe. There are 2 ships of equal size and strength. One is made of wood and the other of steel. Can you explain which one is heavier? Say more. I know I've got engineers and stuff in the audience. I love this. What's your reaction? Okay, so we may not be able to tell. Anybody else have a guess though? They're equal size and strength. Steel versus wood, pound for pound, which one's stronger? Steel, yeah, I'm not trying to trick you on that. I mean, that's my understanding. If you got more data, please tell me. I will change my paradigm about this. But if steel is stronger than wood, to build a boat of the same strength, we would have to use more physical material of wood. So we're sort of deducing here that, my goodness, that wood one probably weighs a lot more than the steel one just because of the amount of materials used. Again, this challenged me a lot. I'm not trying to say I got any of these right. And final one, a little lengthier. Clem and Joe work in a coal mine. At the end of the day, Clem and Joe come out of the mine and bid each other farewell for the night. Clem's face is dirty and Joe's face is clean. But as Clem and Joe set out for home, Joe wipes his face and Clem doesn't bother. Since both men appreciate cleanliness, why doesn't Clem clean his face? Say more. He thinks he's clean. Why? Because he looks at his friend. Oh my God, you got there. I never would have, I had to read the answer on this one, right? So let's just imagine they're not jumping in a car and looking at a mirror. But as we're walking out, I see your face is dirty. I assume mine's dirty. I wipe it. You see my face is clean. You assume yours is clean, so you don't bother. All right, thank you. So first, how were these riddles for you? What did you notice as we were going through these different questions? I see it on the tip of your tongue. Did you want to add? We make things complicated. Yeah. Are we always necessarily aware that we are making things complicated? Okay, we know it's a puzzle, so it has to be difficult. But let me ask you this, are all puzzles equal difficulty? Do we sometimes approach a puzzle with the assumption that it's going to be very difficult and it's very easy? I'm going to be honest, I've recently gotten into jigsaw puzzles and I always underestimate them. I'm like, this one's fine. No, it's not. Okay. So I know this is not new information for y'all, but I want to remind us around some of these assumptions. So I'm going to hand out some assumptions examples. It's the one thing about microphones that's challenging here. Now, I want to mention these are not exhaustive. And I'm not assuming that you were not already familiar with these, right? But I think it's so important that we consider what we bring in to this conversation. If you want to go ahead and answer the text, thank you. So I want you to take a moment and review, again, just some interesting ones. Some are cognitive biases, right? Some of them are different kind of brain tricks that we play on ourselves. But I want you to, in pairs or at your table, discuss this list. I want you to talk about what are the types of assumptions that we're at risk for making in our conversation today. Is it recency bias, where whatever worked last is going to be the thing that we go to? Are we assuming things about the community that we're a part of, right? So I want you to talk about what are those assumptions we need to be thoughtful about today, and then how can we work to avoid these assumptions? So when we report back, I just want to hear you to call out some of those things. Let's be mindful of not falling into these traps, and then share any of those strategies you have for making sure we're approaching this with a fresh mind and acknowledging the ways that we may be short-sighted as we have today's conversation. So what questions do you have about what we're going to do for the next 4 minutes? All right, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll put 4 minutes on the clock. Talk amongst yourself, and please be prepared to report back after those 4 minutes. Thank you, everybody.
When you need to turn it back on, this button.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that's the only handout, so I don't think I'll have to run into that yet. God. I'm gonna go ahead and move this poster. Where you wonder if everyone's just gonna be like, yeah. Like, people really just like do stuff when you tell them
You've been doing this. You're pretty good at it.
college, so like 20 plus. And I started with teens and health education, so this is cake, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
One of you.
or at the very least, have enough professional etiquette to like not completely,
protect.
yeah.
Two more minutes to discuss, 2 more minutes. Yeah, so our, today's scope. Important to do the problem that matter, and it's kind of like. Right, right. Exactly, yeah. Right. Think about something.
Perfect activity for this, but we did it last year and they were concerned there'd be someone here that knows like the trick. So I don't know how well that went, but that's something, you know? Really thankful I had that game at home. To not wander away too much and forget about this microphone. Take this last like 20 seconds to wrap up. All right. So please go ahead and thank your group for discussing, right? We launched into this without a lot of heads up, right? I would love to hear from you all just first. What was the conversation? What are some of those strategies that you came up with? What were some of the assumptions that you think we should name to try to avoid today? Do I have a team or a table that would be willing to share first? I heard y'all talking, so I know there was some stuff. Please.
I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry, so whenever I start the new things, maybe that can be a project, that can be a new activity, that can be a new hobby, whatever, involved in my life, I have a kind of anxiety. Okay, I failed a lot in terms of, winning proposal. Should I try it again?
Yes, thank you. So it's a balance because a lot of these things are there to protect us as humans, right? And so this idea of like, oh my gosh, how much failure can I take? But we have to shift our thinking about each failure isn't actually like bad. It's just a lesson learned closer to success, right? And so that might be a paradigm shift, but we also have to acknowledge that, right? There might be external factors that are really driving down our resilience around, do I really want to try this again? So thank you. Some of you may have had this conversation before. You may have tried these initiatives before, but we have to consider the landscape is different now. So are things aligned in a way that are going to lead to success? Thank you so much. All right, other folks, what'd you discuss? Please, Jim.
I had a lot of them, but I'll put one. For me, in a room full of experts like you all, I have a tendency to go with a halo bias. If you're so good at one thing, whatever you're presenting, you must be really good at that too, when it may or may not be true.
Hey. Not seeing that, but that's okay. Give me some grace around spelling today, if y'all don't mind. All right. The halo effect. I love that. It's a shortcut. All of these are shortcuts, right? But like, oh, you're an expert. You're going to be an expert at this. You're going to be good at this. But that also gives us a short-sighted approach of there's probably a lot of experts that could be good at this. That can sometimes limit kind of who we invite to the table or how we leverage each other's strengths. So thank you so much. Other folks. Please.
So my favorite bias is the hindsight bias. How did they not foresee that? How did they not foresee this coming? I clearly need more coffee. And the reason I think that is we tend to think that everything is linear and there is a direct logical connection from one piece to another. And we simply don't take into account a lot of randomness and things that we simply don't know about.
Yeah.
That would have led to that outcome. So accepting the randomness, I think, is tricky. So we always try to box it in and think linearly, but it's not true.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And follow-up question, how does hindsight bias impact the group, right? If we all get to the outcome and I say, well, I knew all along, right? How does that impact our relationship together?
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. Okay, perfectly said, right? That ultimately nobody wants to be thrown under the bus. And it's a challenge for us when we have less than desirable outcomes to not think about who's to blame. But the reality is everybody working towards this goal was probably doing the best they could and was planning for success. In my experience, there's very few people that really literally try to tank work, right? You have to care a lot about this work to be at this table today. I'm sure you're not here trying to sabotage it, right? And so we have to give grace around what are those factors that we could never have foretold. But I think to your point, we also have to think as we're planning, what is that asterisk of something else could happen entirely than what we were thinking? All right, welcome to the folks just joining. We are just talking about some assumptions and which ones we might want to focus on or try to avoid during today's conversation. And please, there's coffee in the back, donuts, get comfortable. All right. Any final thoughts? Any other specific? Yes. Okay, Angela, please.
I really liked a point that Patrick made, directing our attention to the zero-sum bias, and then also Soryang immediately followed up and said, but some things are zero-sum. So keeping in mind kind of how questions or challenges are framed or developed can affect the extent to which things are zero-sum, win or lose, versus kind of finding new ways to expand what's possible. That sounds really cheesy, but I stand by it.
Cheesy is sometimes, the right answer though, okay? And particularly when we get into our SWOT analysis, it's gonna take some, innovative thinking for us to think or challenge our assumptions about what competition means, right? Are there competitors that are working together could actually benefit us both, right? And so we have to kind of think about that. In this situation, is it win-lose, or can we actually have all of us win? Right? Let's challenge that piece. Thank you. Pat, please.
You never follow a philosopher who's quoting Patrick Gray, because that was going to be my point. The zero-sum game should not be in effect today, because this is not about, oh, if we do this, we can't do that. This is, what else can we do? How do we keep doing more? So they said it far better than I could have, but I want to reiterate that point to the group.
Thank you. Thank you. As our leader, I appreciate just kind of reiterating, we can go there. We can dream in a way today that we don't have to worry about those pieces, right? Let's just dream big. Okay. So let me just take a step back. What did you notice as we went through the activity and this discussion with each other? Were you surprised by some of the assumptions on there? Were you just reminded about these things that you already knew? Why would I start our day with this? Please. Exactly. Yes. If we do not consciously try to avoid them, they're going to show up, okay? And my hope is that going in with this mindset, we can also invite challenging each other, right? That if you start to feel, and this is my role as facilitator too, but if we start to feel that we're operating on assumptions, let's challenge those assumptions. That's one of the benefits of me not having any expertise in your area, is that if I hear you talking about something and not naming that assumption, I'm going to push, right? Why can't we get more money? Why can't we be in a building together? Why couldn't we ask for this, right? And so that's going to be my role today, but I want to give us grace around that, right? Sometimes these sorts of brainstorming meetings can get personal. Sometimes we get worked up. Sometimes we get defensive. And I just want to remind us all that this is a space for all the thinking. We have our leaders that are going to take all the work we do today and try to synthesize after today. So please keep this in mind. Thank you all so much for going there. And with that, we're actually going to move into our Problems That Matter videos. So you were asked to prepare a 60-second video pitch that addressed the following, right? The major problem or challenge that you're passionate about tackling, probably related to the role that you're playing, but if not, cool. I'm excited to learn about all of that. How your expertise contributes to solving this problem. Again, that's going to be really helpful for us to consider what is the scope of the expertise that we have, right? It's really helpful to know all the amazing work that's being done to help us vision how those things can come together in new ways. And then what type of team would be necessary to solve this problem over the next 5 to 10 years? We are going to be asking for resources, right? Like a lot of this is about securing these resources. And so let's not be shy about what it would require to do this. So as we go through these videos, I believe my next slide tells us what we should do. As we watch each other's videos, consider what themes do you see across them, right? We're certainly going to talk about like what is that Venn diagram overlap, but what outliers or new ideas are shared as well. Maybe we have too small of a scope in mind. So let's think about how those extra pieces that maybe don't fit initially could still be a part of the constellation of work that we do. And then finally, what clarifying questions do you have, right? This is going to be the framework or the baseline that is going to help us do our SWOT analysis. So I want to make sure that you have the details to help have that next conversation. So what questions do you have about how we're going to approach these videos? We're going to watch one. We're going to have a moment to just ask if there's clarifying questions. At the end of them, we're going to do that debrief around the themes. Okay? Fantastic, Kyle. If you'll take it away. Let me pause it first a second. Okay, great. Before we go on, quick. All right. Did we have any clarifying questions for our first video? Make sense? Y'all got it? Okay, fantastic. Jump into the next one. Ooh, y'all, I'm barely keeping up, but okay. This is exciting work. I mean, I'm excited to learn about all this, but what questions do you have from our last video? None. It's all making sense. Okay, fantastic. Let's keep going. Questions? Please.
Thank you. I didn't get the first two sentences. Sorry. So if there was an application, what application would it be? Is it is it renewable energy? Okay, thank you.
Energy storage. Thank you so much for clarifying. Perfect. Yes.
Energy storage and Pravin, when you think about your area, do those things speak to one another? I was wondering, I'm reflecting on what Pravin's expertise is and how buildings hold energy or hold heat. And I was just wondering if that spoke to you, Pravin, at all.
Possibility, maybe I don't have to be that loud now. I was thinking about that for future collaborative works in a way that can we have maybe the new materials, or can we just in a broader sense use chemistry in such a way that um, can we either absorb or extract either some of the negative air pollutants, or even using certain materials, can we extract that heat using low energy or low cost materials, so that we don't have to rely too much on the electric energy, which could be very expensive for the users. So I mean, I know this is like further ahead, but I was certainly thinking about that. And just a clarification on my video, I just said we need a lot of multidisciplinary experts. Now looking at other videos, I just realized like, okay, I would actually appreciate some epidemiologists on the team, data scientists. This is a team I'm already working on, but I wasn't sure how far detail I have to go. So I do have a list, and I I know with whom I can work with and with whom I can collaborate. And it would be really nice to have that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think this process, you may have different ways of approaching this video. This is, I don't want to speak for you, but this is not a, after today, you can't still give us details, right? So I think if you have those lists, again, I would encourage you to share after today so that we can get into that fine tune of who on that multidisciplinary team. Thank you. Did you want to add anything before we continue? Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Great discussion. Fantastic. Any questions? Sustainable manufacturing. Thank you and welcome. Thanks for being here. All right. All right. Any questions? Okay, let's keep it moving. All right. Any questions on that one? Okay, I think we're probably starting to identify some themes already. I appreciate that. Let's keep going. Yes, please. Let me get you the microphone. Oh, just kidding. We could ask it out loud, but okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Let's keep moving. All right, any questions on that video? Please, Pat.
You say synthetic biology. What do you mean? What particular?
For the synthetic biology, so mainly related to the microbial engineering. So we engineer the microbials, yeah, currently.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, and I think Amy had to step out, so we'll keep moving. All right, fantastic. Any questions? Patrick. Thank you so much.
CPUs more effectively plugged in.
All right, thank you, Angela. Slightly different, and I appreciate that, right? Does anybody have any questions for Angela about how her particular focus is going to apply? I think it makes sense. Love having you at the table. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, great, please. All right, any clarifying questions? Okay, thank you. I was like,
I probably should, I can't narrate Vesco's slide, but Veselin could not be here today, but he shared a PowerPoint with the various things that they work on. For those who don't know, he's primarily in material science, working on creating new materials for a variety of different applications. I think that's sufficient. He's application of his materials to any problem space. So he applies it in energy. I don't know, does anybody know if Vesco does it in water? Okay, so he also does it in water. That's good. You, yeah, yeah.
all right, cool. All right, let's keep moving. All right, any questions for Amanda? Okay, let's keep going. All right, any questions for Lilith? Thank you so much. All right, any final questions on our final presentation? Can we just take a moment to appreciate the level of expertise, the work that you've already done in these fields, and this opportunity that it sounds like everybody mentioned about the power of coming together multidisciplinary. So I just want to kudos to you all. Thank you for that. Also, thank you, Jennifer. I also want to shout out, thank you, Jennifer, for documenting a lot of this in terms of themes. I know it's probably for your own notes, but before we get into the large group debrief, that was a lot of listening. I want to give you about 3 minutes to just discuss at your table. So what were the themes that you identified? What outliers, new ideas are shared? I'm going to add one that's not up there. I want you all to come up with at least one application for these sciences, right? At least one practical application for bringing together the work of your expertise. Okay, so I'm going to give about 4 minutes to start those conversations. Then we're going to come back as a large group. Again, what were the themes? What are the outliers? And what's at least one practical application of this research and work? All right, go ahead and start chatting. Get it. Hold it?
I think you have to hold it.
Okay.
And then we-
Set that. Check it on time.
Fifteen.
Okay, great. We're way ahead.
After the slides are over, will you need me any longer?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think they have any slides for their debrief or wrap up. So honestly, even when we get to the action items. Or I'll just say, you have to head out for any other.
No, it's okay. I didn't want to hang out here longer than I was needed. I didn't want to just like a ghost hunter.
I think that this university always benefits from one voice. Whenever you wanna hang out, learn, I'm like, what? You're doing what? Man, I had no idea.
I'm gonna give us 2 more minutes to discuss, 2 more minutes.
All right, take this last 30 seconds to wrap up. All right, let's please wrap up. Thank you so much. All right, so we are going to continue this conversation, but we're going to invite the rest of the room in now. Okay, so we're going to start with themes, right? I just want to shout out Jennifer's been doing a great job of documenting some of these. So let's just start with that to make sure that everything's made it up there. What were some of the obvious themes that came up? Multidisciplinary, right? Like I'll just say that one out loud. Thank goodness. Long list of who's going to be on that multidisciplinary team, but I love that, right? If we're tackling these large of issues, we sort of need a lot of folks at the table, right? What are some of the other themes you discussed? Or did you discuss other themes? Yeah, applications of the last question. Yes, totally. Thank you. And then we're gonna, we have one more question after that as well. So any themes that we want to name besides multidisciplinary? Energy, right?
Industrial collaboration was,
It's for accessibility for folks watching the recording.
Right.
Thank you.
most of the experts did mention about industrial partnership. So that was another pattern. I did see some community-based partnerships as well. So those are the two contributions.
Thank you so much, right? So it's not just academic, it's not just research, it's industry, but not just corporate, right? Like let's think about those community-based organizations or other groups kind of doing this work, please.
I heard the sustainability, sustainable material, sustainable manufacturing, sustainable water, energy.
Right. Which seem to be both related to cost as well as impact on communities, right? And so it's both, right? If we can save energy, waste, love that for both reasons, right? Thank you. Other themes. Sorry, let me just do the walk around.
There's a ton of chemists in this room, right? Sort of a half ton of chemists, depending upon how we weigh them. Yeah. Looking at Pat, not sure who the invite list was. Biologists? Do we have? Because you were putting up the biology stuff in your introductory slides. Do we as a university maybe lack those biologists, or they're just not here today?
Was that? Sorry, Pat.
So it's a good question. It's a both and. So some were invited. You're about half of the total invitee list, and so they couldn't attend. And in fact, we had one person who was supposed to be here from the College of Medicine, but she got COVID, so she's unable to attend. And then there are also some areas that we've already met to identify the skills through the bioscience piece. I will say the one thing that Mel Bing mentioned that I think we lack, we have a gap, is in microbial engineering skills and synthetic biology in particular. But that's a good way to listen, is what if you don't know somebody and we don't know somebody, is that going to be a gap, which we'll get to in the next session.
Thank you. Yes, please keep those notes about what gaps we might be finding so far.
Thanks. I just wanted to add on to that another area which seemed to me well reflected in some of the particular examples of multidisciplinary needs that people gave in their talks, but that also isn't, I think, very, very well represented here just in who happens to be here today, which is, broadly put, social sciences. So social science and policy explicitly was referenced, as well as economists and marketing, anyway, stuff, and community-based research, right, sort of blends into social sciences. I know at least Carly was invited, who's on sabbatical, I believe, but that's, I would just wanted to say explicitly that I think that's, I heard a real need, and I personally believe a real need in this kind of broad interdisciplinary space. And I'll add on, if I can, one additional thought with my disciplinary hat on, which I'm mostly not bringing these conversations today, which is beyond social sciences, I actually think philosophy of science and bioethics, environmental ethics could be a really important contributor here. Some, without going into too many details, some varieties of philosophy of science shades into theoretical work in the sciences. And you all, we are so cheap. Our research is free. So that could be really interesting.
Thank you for that pitch. Yeah, we charge in data collection, right? James.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of Angela's comment. So one of the things that I think is really, really important, the things that came up, if we don't get buy-in from the public, if we don't get buy-in from policymakers, then none of this happens. So there's a lot of technological things that already exist, but unless someone puts it into practice, then it doesn't matter. And so that's the piece that I'd like to focus in on at least a significant amount of time, because I think we have some expertise here on the technical side of things, but how do you get an economist to understand, okay, if you're gonna weave this in, this is how it's gonna impact the economy. How are you gonna get people to really care about the things that we all care about? So if everyone cared about it, it wouldn't be a problem anymore. we'd say be out there and solving the problem. I think the first step is to get everybody to care as much as we do.
Thank you. And I think that's a great segue to some of our outliers, because I just had to mention the marketing, right? In your particular presentation, I thought that was incredibly salient, just thinking about how much of this work other people don't know about already. And so even thinking about getting UC to align our efforts more broadly, right? So that we're all amplifying this message, so that we're all helping kind of align our efforts. Like, we got to get a lot of communication going, and we've got to think about the way we tell the story, right? Not just what we're doing, but why it matters and how it impacts, right? That's how, particularly when we think about community-based involvement, if there's any history where they don't trust research for whatever reason, we have a lot of work to do in terms of that relationship building and how we tell the story of how their involvement is going to impact them positively, right? Think about all the marketing campaigns for everything else out there. I think it's very real that we really have to think about not just the work we're doing, but how we're sharing that, at what frequency, and who those messengers are as well. Right? Other outliers, though, you can still share themes if I skipped you, but any other outliers that folks noticed, please?
Just lots of people mentioned data science, and we don't have, I don't think, again, by luck or by design, we don't have a lot of statisticians here, representatives of the statistics department. We have a whole statistics department at the University of Cincinnati inside the math department. And computer science, those guys, might be cool to hear their perspective on what we're doing here.
Thank you so much. Who else isn't at the table that we might want to invite? Any other outlier needs? I love the idea around the ethics conversation, right? I think it really rounds out when we think of it. Again, when we're talking about the challenging assumptions, sorry, I moved that poster way over there, but that's one of the biggest ones. Research is obviously good. Learning more is always in our benefit. And I will just say, historically, I don't know if everybody believes that to be true, right? And so not making the assumption that folks are going to be excited just because it's innovative, right? Next lives here, yes, but we also want to focus on that impact, that we're having a positive impact on the community around us, right? Okay. If there are no other outliers, let's get to the use case, the application, all right? So what did y'all discuss in terms of potential applications for this work? All right, please, Lilith.
Thank you. And unfortunately, Praveen just stepped out because it was tied in closely to what he was thinking about. But I will venture a mini synthesis that we did at the table. And the theme of it is sustainable buildings and communities. So we have the community-based approach that Angela, you and Praveen are experts in. So it's clear that there is a community need even in our own city to build sustainable buildings, resilient buildings, resilience to floods and resilience to heat. And we have a bunch of experts in material science and chemistry who can make materials that are conducive to building these sustainable buildings and to deal with the challenges in energy transport, in energy recovery from water, from wastewater, etc. So that is the theme that this table would like to put forward, is the sustainable communities and the buildings.
So if there was an institute for sustainable, resilient communities, I like to say sustainable, resilient futures. But if there was such an institute, what company would care? Or what sort of industry, not just name one industry that would care that that institute is here and would be a customer or a partner and would benefit from such an institute?
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so buildings is my area of work. I give as an example, UC Berkeley, right? They have what's called the Center for Built Environment, right? And it's not an institute, but it's a center. And basically it's a research center that runs based on partnerships with industry, right? So they get, I don't know, 25, 50, whoever industry partners come in, those partners dictate the research agenda, they pay a fee to be a part of it, and then they have researchers tackle those problems. So as an example, UC Berkeley's experts on, this is kind of detailed, but like radiant heating and cooling. They've done a lot of like radiant heating and cooling stuff. It's a type of HVAC system. Industry was interested in that. They paid them to do it, right? So, I mean, when you think about sustainable buildings and communities, it's a very, very broad topic. You could have construction industry, building construction materials. You could have, you know, a lot of the people who are partners with Pews, the local, you know, government and NGOs, community-based organizations. So yeah, I mean, I guess I give them as one example of like industry partners. Those are design firms, construction companies, materials companies. Does that answer your question, Jennifer?
I love it. I also appreciate just the getting us thinking, right? First, we want to think about what is the obvious like application of the thing based off of need. But then we have to think about, again, who's interested, like what is the landscape of the world that's actually going to care about this, right? Where's the funding going to come from? Where are those partners that we're thinking about? So I love it because again, buildings to me, we operate everything in buildings, whether it's our homes or our work, like we're in buildings all the time. And so I think there's such a broad application, but it's helpful to think about who's most immediately interested. HVAC, I could imagine entirely would be interested, yeah.
Jen, this is P&G's 50-liter home program. P&G's 50-liter home program.
Yeah, interesting, okay. Love that, all right. Jennifer, would it be helpful to get more?
Just one other answer, which is aspirational. I don't know if the others are, but I have a friend who is Duke's community-facing sustainability person. I had a conversation with him recently, and I'm sure others in the room know this, but sustainability is, of course, one of their 3 fundraising or foundation pillars. And then when we were talking about how UC work could relate to Duke's activities, he was especially interested in, I mean, it's again on the social science side, but like how we can be part of the regional conversation about energy and energy production in a way that I think fits with the sustainable, resilient communities kind of umbrella concept as well. Yeah, and I think applied research in energy production, energy usage in ways that interface directly with their kind of community relationships.
Greater Cincinnati Waterworks. And if we can round up Sally's symposium's participants, everybody there, because there is a huge landscape of startups in clean water that are in this area, startups and medium-sized companies that might be interested to be involved.
Thanks. Yeah, more organizations coming to mind. So the Cincinnati 2030 District is a local partnership of building owners, design firms, committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in buildings, water use, transportation emissions. It's got a huge number of high-profile businesses in town that are members. P&G made me think about it. Lots of big buildings downtown are members. So I think this could be of interest to the 2030 members as well. Caveat, not to throw something in that's potentially negative, but I do want to just mention, I love this theme, right? It's what I do. I work on buildings. I've been working on building my whole career. But when I think about who at UC works on sustainable built environments, like fits in that specific theme, there's really only a small kind of handful of us. And so that would be, I love it, but is that a theme around which everybody can coalesce if there's really a small number of us that work on that topic? I don't know. I would love it, but
yeah. You know, and please, yeah, I know, right? That's not, but please do hold on to that thought for our SWOT analysis, because I think it could easily translate into one of the internal factors, right? So I see it, everybody's like, yes, let's all help you with your work while you primarily hold that. No, we're certainly going to address that piece. Yes.
If I talk about sustainable water, maybe we can start from, small company, like maybe not small one. Intel comes to Ohio, then the city of, Columbus, they struggle a lot to supply fresh water for the manufacturing line. So city negotiating with Intel to reduce the consumption of fresh water and increase the recycling of their wastewater on site. So it will be one example we can think about who will be potential consumer or beneficial, applicant for this one. And also community level, California. We know the wildfire is huge issue. There is no water if the firefighters open the hydrant, no water flowing out. So California, they recycle wastewater using proper pipeline and for irrigation and for other community purposes. So it can be a small scale, like a small industry application. Also, it can be a large scale community-based application. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that idea because again, when we think about these applications, I mean, like buildings, but even these small pieces could help us in terms of like the quick wins. I'm sure that water piece is going to be related to buildings. And if we could figure that out and start messaging that, getting folks socialized around this idea, it can kind of pave the way for these future conversations.
I would add art. Art. I think that what I would like to see more of is blending of STEM and art. And by doing that, we enhance our communications piece, outreach, and also potentially tap into art foundations that might be interested in artistic representation of sustainability, of what water and energy balance means, what is a community, and multidisciplinary aspects around it. So that would be also interested.
I love that. I mean, just think about the leather lab, if we even focused around that of sustainability of leather products, how art working with DAP, right? Like have a whole series of it, right? It creates conversation. So I love this kind of thinking out of the box or inside the box, whatever, to just what are the different spaces that we can have these conversations for folks that maybe aren't in the heavy science or math space.
Since this one, I think is not a zero-sum bias, right? So I want to change the topic a little bit. So mostly related to sustainability. So I would think is that even in Ohio right now is competing for the sustainable biomanufacturing. I think Ohio State already received funding for that. So I think a sustainable biomanufacturing is important for this state and also for our students and also for future next generation of the scientists and engineers because we need to provide the jobs for them. And also we need to increase the economic for this state. So produce fuels, chemicals, and materials important for us to be engineer educators. So I just bring this topic. So hopefully you guys can jump in to provide more information.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up questions so far? Okay, great. Other applications. What about energy, right? We've heard a little bit about water. We heard a little about buildings. Also, wherever you're going, Amanda, please.
Well, one of the things that got brought up here as a theme was just a lot of focus on like CO2 and carbon-based work, which made me think about there's just decarbonization, right? It's a different emphasis than sustainability. They're sort of in the same universe, but it's a different focus and emphasis. There's a NSF RU right now being led out of mechanical engineering that's focused on decarbonization specifically, and it's got a bunch of different faculty from chemistry and biology and chemical engineering and wherever. So that's kind of a different twist on it. It's really focusing on the carbon decarb piece.
Okay. And is there kind of the same question? Are there like industry folks that are focused on this right now, the decarbonization piece?
Yes, to the extent that people are focused on greenhouse gas emissions. Yes.
Okay.
I would say it's similar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, right? One of the challenges that we might have to put up is, again, those gaps in terms of who is interested in giving money for this. Please.
I just wanted to add on this decarbonization side. Of course, we have a sort of issue, one set of issues related to urban technologies that are possible only in this environment. And, a lot of us are in, I guess, chemical industry. So this is a totally different set of things that are possible, that are not possible within an urban environment. So for example, aside from Intel being built, facilities being built in Central Ohio, right? Around Columbus, there's a tremendous number of data centers that are kind of going up. 73 or 75 data centers, about 20 in Cincinnati, I think. And the energy demand for those will be enormous. I think in 3 years, they're restarting a 3 Mile Island, you know? So decarbonization, you know, how can we talk about decarbonization without talking about nuclear energy? And I don't think it's this something that's not at this table. So I think it's a component that maybe need to be heard as well. And because it ties in energy, you know, water, maybe some other issues that are related.
I just have to add my little thing here. No one's brought up AI, but I heard that 3 Mile Island is all related to AI. So I'm just going to put out the AI conversation.
Before we head into break, we all appreciate the conversation around here. I just want to sort of reiterate, I know people are starting to think about themes, but it's not just that it's a zero sum, it's what we're thinking of can have multiple different verticals, some that are nascent, Amanda, that the university would invest to build around and build up. Others may be more developed. So this is, you know, not, oh, this group isn't picking one thing and saying this is what we think is best. It's throwing out the range of possibilities that we can all explore as an institution together. And your point about nuclear is very good. Jennifer and I were down at Oak Ridge National Lab, and it's a huge focus at the DOE facilities, especially Oak Ridge is one of those, of where they're going to get the energy to power everything. So clearly, it's another area UC has a little bit, but very little expertise, especially around the energy piece. But if you're okay, I think we can take a break, take 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to the next part, get up, walk around. Again, restrooms are either out this door or out that door, but we will meet back here. I guess I should look at official time at 10 till. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. How's everybody feeling? I got a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. So let's recap just a little bit. We started with what assumptions do we need to challenge, right? You all have been doing a fantastic job of continuing to challenge assumptions. We started learning about the resources we have currently. It was not a finite, amount of things, right? We obviously have a lot of expertise outside of this room as well. But it helped to kind of start us thinking in this vein of what do we have in terms of our expertise, our work? What are those opportunities to really put it into application? This activity around SWOT analysis is going to help us get a full picture of the landscape, right? How many of you have done a SWOT analysis before? Fantastic. Okay, great. So you're familiar. Great. I'm still going to just briefly go over this. So a little bit of background around it. This is kind of not the most interesting thing, but Kyle, if you don't mind. This is really a tool that was developed to help us consider all of the factors that can play into the future planning, right? It was developed in the 1960s, so it is a tried and true and tested tool here. And it is used in conjunction with strategic planning processes. So again, as we're going through this, it's about getting all the information out there, and then next steps are going to be that we're going to synthesize, look at, again, those application opportunities, and kind of try to see what the best opportunities would be for us to go into. So just to remind folks about what SWOT analysis is, if you'll go to our next slide, we've got internally what's good and what's not so good. So we're going to talk about the strengths. What is the expertise? What are the resources? What is the history, right? We can even maybe invite some of those assumptions because it's part of the story, right? Just because we have a 200-year history doesn't mean that it guarantees another 200, but let's name that there's something about it that we should consider as we continue moving. Weaknesses, I know we're always quick to opportunities. Yes. But for this, just for the acronym, we're going to talk about weaknesses. So where are we lacking, right? Where are maybe there gaps in terms of the expertise, the resources, the history, the community connections, whatever it might be. So this is going to be internal. Next, we're going to talk about the external. So what are the good things outside of us that could be opportunities for us, right? So who might value our strengths? We can think about our industries around here. We've already started talking about some of those things where state of Ohio being awarded for clean bio manufacturing. Did I get that right? Oh, yes. Right, that's a great opportunity for us to align with the work that's already being done, right? Or the funding streams that already exist. What trends are working in our favor, right? Let's talk about on the landscape, is there a big move around sustainability? Can we jump on the wave, right? And what prizes are within reach? So thinking about maybe some of those low-hanging fruit pieces that you're already aware of in terms of those opportunities. Now, threats, what are the headwinds that we're facing? We might have to broaden it to higher ed entirely when we think about that, because as much as research is its own thing, if we think about enrollment, the enrollment cliff, like the future of higher ed, it's obviously going to play into some of the landscape that we're working within. Who might challenge us? Who might the folks that don't want to participate with us or actively work against us? And then what could go wrong? What are some of the risks that we're facing when we think about the external environment? So I will rephrase this one other way. If you have a hard time thinking about that, let's think about in sort of superpowers, okay? So our superpowers are internal and within our control. So this is the strength that defines us, you know? If we're thinking internal and within our control, did I just do that wrong? Yes, okay, sorry. Our Achilles heel would be our weaknesses, right? So our greatest weakness or fatal flaw, what would villains use against us? If this helps get in that frame of mind. When we're thinking about external, our allies are external. These are outside of our control, right? This is the big thing when we're thinking internal and external. We can't necessarily control how our partners think long-term about their partnerships with us, right? There may be some times where our allies switch over to our villains, right? And vice versa, right? When we're thinking about that no-sum game, I do want us to think about these villains, but I want us to keep that caveat of what would it take to switch them to our allies, right? Where might we have aligned interests that we could actually work together with these folks? But I also want to call out, it's not always people. They could be environments. They could be those standard underlying assumptions about industry. They could be a lot going on there. So hopefully this helps get the wheels turning. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the 4 flip charts around the room to do this activity. Now, before we do, I just want to make sure, do you all have a good sense of what we might think of as competitors? Great. Competition for what? Right? When we're thinking about those kind of villains or those threats, what does it look like in this research landscape? Like if someone else is smarter and figures it out faster, is that bad for us? If UC Berkeley Center trademarks a particular process or something, I don't know why they do that, right? But like, I just want us to get us thinking about this sense of competition. Now again, zero-sum game, we don't need to assume that it's going to be a bad thing, but like who else is doing this work? Who may we need to be thoughtful about getting ahead of, right? That their work, if they start it and they tell the story in a different way, is it going to make it harder for us in our own approach to this work? Okay, I think there were a bunch of lines here, but it could be direct competitors, thank you, offering the same service. You know, do we think about our other higher ed institutions, these research institutions? Where are we seeing this collaboration or difference? And again, these potential competitors, right? Can we think about sharing the resources, sharing the funds so that ultimately we get those outcomes for our communities that we're really looking for? So a competitor that could also be a partner, think about, are there strategic partnerships that could be mutually beneficial doing this similar work? All right, so I just wanted to put that out there again to get the wheels turning. Now we are gonna start, each table is going to be assigned to one of our posters. So we've got our internal strengths, our internal weaknesses back here. We've got our external opportunities and our external threats. And so you're gonna have 7 minutes in each poster to jot down your ideas. Now, you will have an opportunity then to switch posters. So I want you to really dive into the specific piece. Keep in mind the things that come up that are gonna apply to those other posters because you're gonna have a chance to add them. As we work, I just wanna encourage you, there are no wrong answers. So if someone in your group says something and you're like, I don't know if this fits good, put it up. It's okay. We'll clear that out. Ultimately, we want to get the most information that we can out of this. If you go to the next poster and you see there's stuff you already want to say, just put a check mark. We don't have to write it several times, right? And then we're going to keep on moving. So I'm going to ask table 2 to start with our strengths. Please, yeah. Yeah, please.
Can you maybe clarify what are we doing the SWOT analysis for?
Fantastic. So the SWOT analysis, my understanding, is around this nexus of work, right? This sort of thinking about this application. I'm walking over to Pat, and I'm just to clarify here, this actual kind of collaboration.
Good question. It's sort of a follow-on to what you all were just doing. As you're thinking about what are our opportunity spaces, and it could be around thematic areas. Like we have an opportunity to do something together at UC to address decarbonization. You could think of it in terms of very more specific. You know, we have strengths in catalysis, but we have weaknesses in something else. So I want you to think of it in terms of if we're looking at the end to understand what is UC good at and what are our opportunities around water, energy, green, clean tech, sustainability. Think of it in that fashion, but be broad. Don't hone in on, we got to focus just on this one specific thing, because your groups are diverse enough in terms of expertise that everybody's going to have something different that they're aware of in that. Yes, for us, for this group, if we're thinking, if I go to the president and I want to say, we need to make a $100 million investment in this, we've already done these types of analysis. We looked at our strengths, we looked at our weaknesses, we see opportunities, and here's some of the threats that are out there. Is that clear for everybody else too? Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarifying question. Again, I think a lot of the details that were shared in your videos would make sense for our internal strengths. A lot of the gaps that you've identified might be some of our internal weaknesses. And then I think, again, that landscape of just like, what else is going on external to us? So table 2, I'm going to ask you to be at strengths. Table 3, I'm going to ask you to go to weaknesses. Table 4, thank you, I'm going to ask you to go over to opportunities. And table 1, to keep you on your toes, I'm going to have you start at threats. So I'm going to put 7 minutes on my watch. I will let you know when we're about halfway through, and then when it's time to switch. Again, just get as much information up on the poster. And when you need to, go ahead and switch to a clean piece of paper, right? We've got plenty of paper out there. All right, please wrap up your last thought. And once you're done, if you can point your eyes at me, so I know that you're done. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great, 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 great. Again, finish that last thought, and when your group's done, if you'll point your attention towards the front. I have a few more instructions before we return to our seats. So for those wondering, thank you, but go back to that poster for a second. All right, what we're about to do next is we're going to debrief these posters, but I'm going to ask you, the group that's at the poster, to share the content of your poster. So I want you to go ahead and quickly, in your small groups, determine who is going to be our spokesperson. And we're going to give a lot of grace around what you happen to just accidentally end up being the representative for. It's okay. You are going to be speaking on behalf of the entire group's perspectives, right? So again, as you review, you will be able to ask your audience for help if there are acronyms we don't know, if we need clarification. But I want you to just make sure you're familiar with your poster before you return back to your seats. So take a moment, review, determine who's going to be your spokesperson. And once you're done, you can return to your seats. You will actually be presenting from the front. So once you go back to your table, I'm going to move the posters to the front, and we're going to do it one at a time from the front. But I just feel like it is impossible for folks to see across the room. It is like, this is a big old room. So. Yeah, if you don't mind. Bring the whole chart up. We'll just toss this down, man. Perfect. Oh, okay. Whoop. Just kidding. Let me throw that on the ground. Okay. We can, yes, perfect. And we will move as we debrief. Okay. And this one goes with this one. Thank you. Yes, yes. Sounds good. All right. So those are our weaknesses. If you'll again start moving towards the front after you've reviewed, and we're going to bring the posters with us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Perfect. Perfect. We're just moving all around. We will organize. Thank you. Perfect. I'm just gonna set this right here. Great. All right. Are we ready to jump in to debrief? That wasn't the most excited, but guess what? Once we debrief, it's lunchtime. So who's ready to debrief? Woo! Okay. We're going to start with strengths. So can I get the group that ended with strengths? Thank you so much, Lilith. Now, let me set some ground rules real quick. I know the energy is shifting, so I want us to please try to focus on just this debrief. We want to make sure the lists are as complete as possible because, again, the group's going to keep working off of what we have here today. So please make sure we're adding the things up there. Ask your clarifying questions. Now, as you know, the content of these posters is a collaboration of all of our input. So we're going to give a lot of grace to the presenters that they may not be the one that put that idea up there. All right? So, Lilith, do you mind?
Well, I'm the lucky one because I get to, bring people's moods up because I'm talking about strengths. And
thank you.
Well, we're going to get to that mood in about 30 seconds. All right. So among strengths, we have, I think I could summarize some of this is awesome faculty. Most of it, a lot of them are already here. We have support from local industry, and P&G and Kroger are in particular mentioned. We also have support from federal level organizations like EPA, NIOSH, Oak Ridge National Lab. We have Right Path. So this is regarding the expertise. Now we have a great co-op program, and I think it's something that we need to discuss whether co-op becomes part of the research institute and production or not. We are in an urban environment. We are a comprehensive university, and I think many people mentioned support from the leadership for this kind of institutional projects.
And then I think just this one might be important to say out loud.
Fundamental financial metrics are strong, and I'm not exactly sure what that means. Financial, yes.
High tuition, that are small schools. We're a big school with low tuition. We're strong. I don't have to personally worry very much about students. I think we're cheap and we're big and we're valuable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're continuing to grow where a lot of schools are not, right?
We're only $11,000. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And we have visibility already as an institution because we have high-profile grants from federal agencies. Again, kudos to the leadership and to the faculty that we recognize that it is important to tackle big projects, big questions, and we need multidisciplinary teams. We need to break the existing silos. The university has an entrepreneurial mindset. We have an entire building dedicated to that, the 1819. I added the modeling and simulation expertise. We often talked about a lot of wet chemistry and experimental work that is done in the university, but I think we also have the digital and modeling part on the other side to take those data and build on those. There are open-minded faculty in the university with a collaborative mindset. There is leadership talent among the faculty, and all of us have very large professional networks that we can tap into.
Thank you. Any questions or additions to the strengths? We got a lot going well for us, right? Love that. Okay, so we're going to keep with our internal focus and move to our weaknesses, because I think it's helpful to just call attention to the inverse quality of this, right? A lot of times the things that are our strengths are going to be the opposite of our weaknesses, right? So there, you may see some of this relationship. Can I get a volunteer from our team over here that wouldn't mind reviewing? Fantastic. Do you want me to move that up here so people can see?
Sure. All right. You all have identified some limitations that we are facing. I think the most checked, oh no, this is now most checked. The most checked item is difficulties hiring and finding talented graduate students and postdocs. Followed by lack of support staff. I added a specification here, I'll take credit for it, of including even, in my experience, enough support for pre-award grant needs. There's also a lot of check marks for the need for more data and software developers, specific or more broadly staff to support research projects. Some specific disciplinary needs: energy, electric grid experts, microgrids, environmental economists. Are there more? Nuclear chemistry and engineering, microbial engineering. Are those all the disciplines? I think so, or specific research areas. And then people point out a disconnect between experts in industry and also between existing on-campus experts. Limitations to accessing expensive software. Limitations, maybe I should have said with pre-award grant support, maybe support is best for NSF, NIH grants. Maybe there's some limited knowledge around supporting other kinds of grants, it sounds like. Disincentivization. Disincentives for engaging with policy work, as well as lack of incentives for collaborating with faculty across different parts of the institution, different disciplines, and perhaps for doing community engaged research as well. All right, I'm trying to categorize as I go here. The remaining ones I don't think I mentioned are a lack of department buy-in for hiring certain subject matter experts, a lack of institutional commitment to sustainability, sustainable actions, and then a couple more grant-related topics: lack of cost share support for grants, for example, for Department of Energy stuff, and the overhead and grants policy that results in a very low return to faculty of the actual dollars from the grant. Yes, is that detail? Yeah. Did I get it all?
I want to just comment a little bit. I recently was at this conference and I met a really cool guy who's the head of a policy institute at his university. His name is Drew. And Drew and I had lunch and we talked about a problem that's universal. I feel like most of my comments on the weaknesses aren't really targeted exactly at UC. They're not particular weaknesses of UC exactly. But academia as an institution broadly has a really hard time appreciating and incentivizing policy work. And I would love to see that. That means that we're geared to accepting NSF grants. The grants that I bring in from the World Bank or the UN, we actually can't even process those. So my grants don't come in through the University of Cincinnati. I'm bumped out to something called UCRI. Most of my grants go through UCRI, this sort of thing. So I think, yeah, to have as an institution to really value the non-standard federal research grants, I think would be profound and would be empowering to researchers trying to do that kind of work.
Right. Thank you so much for bravely sharing out that poster. Any questions or additions? I know there was a group that maybe had another idea you wanted to add, or do you feel like it was covered?
I was going to mention, I think we have a new policy center, right? The Portman Policy Center. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, again, please keep the thoughts coming. I think we can see an intersection of these topics, right? That there are elements that are about UC's business overall that's going to impact kind of the internal environment here. But we certainly want to keep focused on our smaller landscape. So group that's going to talk about our opportunities, if you want to come on up here. Thank you. I'll try to move this out of the, okay, yeah. Light right there. Yeah. And I can flip through these? Yeah, and I'm happy to.
Okay, great. And I'm just gonna sidebar selfishly and say, I do a lot of policy work. I've never heard of this Portman Policy Center. I would love to know more about it. So maybe.
The gentleman at your table is the dean of A&M.
Great, let's talk after this. Sounds like there's some other policy people in the room. Okay, opportunities. There's a chunk here talking specifically about water-related things. A note about interest in local manufacturing here in Ohio, that's an opportunity for us. Some folks listed a number of local and regional kind of sustainability organizations, Green Umbrella, which is located here at Digital Futures, the Midwest Sustainability Summit. We have some local companies, P&G, Kroger, Duke Energy. Flip. Oh, okay. And actually, let me come to this one last. Up at the top, people had listed some federal funding opportunities that tend to be similarly structured to what we're talking about, like interdisciplinary stuff, NSF, Smart and Connected Communities, CCI. Agreed that there are lots of federal funds available for interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary work like this in sustainability. Someone flagged student interest in sustainability, and I agree. I think that's a real big attractor. A big thing about students who want to work in my particular area is they have a sense of purpose, right? And I think we can sell that through this institute, that students are looking for that. Local chemical industry, yeah, again, Ohio economy, Jobs Ohio, so interest. I mean, our state is very interested in manufacturing and interested in jobs, right? And to the extent that we compare that with sustainability, that's a great thing. In our group, we went last, so I don't think any other groups saw this, but we talked a bit about the opportunity to be something like what they have at the University of Toledo, where they have this hub that's centered around solar cells, where they've leveraged First Solar, which is a company up there, the University of Toledo. I think they brought in Bowling Green and Ohio State too. They got a bunch of state funding. And so they took this kind of local thing that they're interested in, known for, and made this nice academic industrial partnership. Some of the other folks in the group brought it up. I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds like a great idea. So I don't know if you want to comment further. All right, great. Cool. So it's like, what's our equivalent here? Questions?
Thank you. All right. I just want to call attention to this piece around students already having an interest, right? I just wanted to call attention to one of the challenges around incentivization, right? Like, you cannot have enough money to give people money to do everything we need to do. And so I think finding that alignment of what is the interest already, where's that momentum already? Love it. All right, last but not least, can I get our threats group? Come on up. Thank you so much. Let me hand you this. And I will.
Okay, threats, unpredictable.
So good.
Right on cue. Okay.
Unpredictable federal policies, distribution of funding, political climate, and priorities, funding cycles, economic climate. Not sure what. Competition with other higher education institutions, long-term problems in a world looking for short-term payback, long time scale for commercialization and deploying clean technologies, short-term political priorities, ever-changing landscape of technology itself, institutional political climate and competitive priorities. Threats are, I guess, other institutions here locally in Ohio, Ohio State, divestment from higher education, from different entities, a personal reflection of the threat of fatigue, discouragement, and loss of fighting spirit. Okay. Lack of interest from industry, challenges in scaling, funding scope, and challenges include new competitors, industrial research. Challenge is UC ranking, maintaining it instead of the other way around. Graduate postdoc quality is somewhat lacking, needs to be improved. Demographic cliff in a sense that we're moving into the times when the enrollment in higher institutions should decline significantly for demographic reasons. Everybody expects that. Another challenge is and threat is distrust in science in general from public in general. Collaboration with industry is limited. They have different goals and timescales and objectives, kind of rhymes with what was on the previous page. And we also need grant funding, therefore, to sustain and maintain research effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What questions do we have, please?
You mentioned like scalability, and am I hearing you right when you say when you say our capability to commercialize is too low? Is that what I understood?
Capability to commercialize. Does anybody remember kind of putting that piece down? Are we saying that it's low? It might be this poster right here. Here we go. The long time scale for commercializing and deploying clean tech. Awesome. Thank you for that clarifying question. Okay. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion from a time perspective. We are certainly going to debrief this, but I know y'all have been looking at those box lunches back there. So I'm going to encourage us to take a 10-minute break to go get your lunch. I'm also going to put our posters up on this wall so that if you want to just do a quick walk by, take a look at what else came up there just to synthesize. We're going to jump back into this. But the next activity, once we move past this, thank you so much for giving so much detail, is we're going to have a chance to talk about the benchmarking of institutions, right? Those institutions you researched. We're going to have a little, while we eat, opportunity to check back in about what stood out to you from your own research around those institutions. And then we're going to wrap up with some action items. So that's what's coming up next. But we're actually just going to take a 10-minute break. In that 10-minute break, please go get your lunch. And again, if you would like, come revisit these posters just to get a sense of what we discussed. So let's be back here at 12:03 to continue on with our agenda. Thank you all so much. All right, if folks can grab their lunch and head back to their tables. I don't mean to be a taskmaster, but I know we have several additional things that we're going to do before we wrap up on time at 1. So if y'all are okay, we're going to just gently move in to some additional dialogue. Also now, I know that you're eating, so I will have grace around. If you have to share something, I will let you finish, chewing before I put you on the spot there. But I want to just go back to our SWOT analysis. I'm not letting go of that yet because we put a lot of work into it. I will also say this is the foundation in which our leadership is really going to look and try to discern kind of what are those best opportunities for us. So I want to ask you, what aspects of the work may have the biggest impact on our success? So it could be one of the themes, could also be some of the specifics that came up. So of the conversation, did anything really land for you around impact? Anything that feels like we really need to name and acknowledge as we move forward with any potential planning? They were all great ideas. I mean, we're not diminishing any of them, but anything that comes to the forefront, please.
I think the biggest thing is institutional support. Institutional support for this work goes away, then none of this is going to happen, no matter what other support comes through.
And when you mean institutional support, is it just money? Is it attention? Is it?
All of the above. So it's allowing these things to happen, putting resources towards it, messaging it out, having it be a priority, holding people accountable for it, all of those things.
Thank you. Institutional support is such a huge one, right? UC is such a large organization doing so many things. And that's the real challenging piece, that we can have very important work that gets kind of lost in the shuffle because there's so much other very important work going on. And so it's not just the dollars. I think we certainly have the wheels moving on dollars, but are we getting the airtime in terms of what the president's talking about, or the board of trustees, right? Are we getting kind of the right alignment in terms of how we're prioritizing that? Thank you, James. Please.
I think my thought is very much a follow-up on yours, which is sort of, once that is in place, it seems like a very important consideration, and one that's hard to attend to, is exactly how the support is structured, because so much of what's possible and sort of what the end result will be is set into place when it's determined sort of like what the funding is directed to, what the rules for support are, who is at the table. Those kinds of initial, seemingly small decisions end up having a big downstream impact.
Thank you. I don't think there's necessarily a way to avoid that thing happening, except by approaching it in an iterative process, right? Where we have to make some initial decisions, but we also need to have the opportunity and the mechanism to go back and revisit once we have more information. So how can we build structures that are strong enough to get us moving, but flexible enough to allow us to shift midstream? And I think sometimes the pacing of the work, we get going, we're like, we don't have time to look back, but then we just accept things that are weakening our work, right? Or making it harder. And my goodness, to go back to whoever bravely put on the personal stuff of, my God, am I tired? I think that that's really important in terms of the sustainability of the work and the sustainability of you all doing this work, right? We didn't even talk about a threat of turnover. But I don't know if in your areas, that whole thing of, there might be great people out there, but the amount of onboarding you have to do to get someone into the nuance of the work that we're doing, we lose so much. And so how can we pay attention to what people need now to make sure that they can continue to show up at this table and support that work? I love that. Any other thoughts, priorities that we need to focus on? Okay. Were there any themes that you saw emerging regarding our internal and external qualities? Some of it's the theme of out of our control, right? Like, we have to be good colleagues to the rest of the institution that's also making sure our excellence is at the place it needs to be so that our reputation stays strong and we're all able to do the work that we need to. Right? So I think there's a theme of that. Good colleagues. Anybody notice which of our lists were easier to come up with or longer? You can also reference the wall if you need to go back. Was it easier for us to focus on the weaknesses or the challenges? Or did your mind immediately go to the strengths? By show of hands, how many of you went to strengths first? How many of you went to weaknesses first? Okay, strengths, fantastic. All right, so the real piece around this is that we're gonna have both of those pieces. And it's important that we don't ignore the negative with toxic positivity, and we don't get so bogged down in hopelessness that we're not taking advantage of the opportunities. And so SWOT, I really love it, is really good to make sure that we're really balancing our perspectives. For every opportunity, we probably have a threat. And if we don't think about it as a no-sum game, those two things might actually be one and the same. So I know Pat is not yet back, but I will just say I know they're going to continue to use the work that you all did to start informing some of those next steps around the work. So any final thoughts about SWOT analysis? Okay, then we're going to keep on rolling. Oh, please, please, yes, Peter.
Yeah, Peter's cool. That's fine. Whatever. Those who interpret our SWOT outputs are going to be thinking in terms of addressing weaknesses and maybe using our strengths to address our weaknesses, right? Yes. So not naming the weaknesses and saying, oh, I guess there's nothing we can do about that, but naming our weaknesses and saying, how do we use the strengths that we have to address our weaknesses, right? I was thinking a little bit about that as I was doing the weaknesses. But I don't know that we did that explicitly here. I think that's a cool exercise that maybe we could be involved in a little bit as well. Thinking, okay, we have these weaknesses. Maybe we all know that we have these weaknesses, or maybe some of us feel them more acutely than others. What do we do now? Yeah.
Great, I love that. So I'm hearing it as a request for our leadership that when time comes to really do that kind of matching game, that you all be part of that conversation. Again, it's not just let's have as many voices at the table to get the information out there, but also how we synthesize it. So I think that's a really helpful request. And I will say that's exactly how it should go, right? That we are ultimately trying to leverage our strengths. We're trying to minimize our weaknesses. And oftentimes those things have a relationship. Usually the answer to our weakness is in fact in our strengths. So thank you for bringing us back to that. Perfect. All right. So we're going to move into the benchmarking conversation. So we're just literally going to pass the microphone. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about what your key takeaways were from the other centers or institutes that you reviewed. So I've got hopefully big enough that you can see them, but the list of the resources that were provided in the pre-work. And I'm just going to give you 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to track time just to make sure we get through everybody. But I want you to just talk about, again, what are the key takeaways? What were you impressed by? What were you surprised by? What do you think might be a novel idea that we could borrow in our own work, okay? And while you all do that, I'm gonna get a flip chart and just kind of keep some notes of the details that y'all share. So 2 to 3 minutes per person. Please do not stress. I'm just gonna hand the mic around. And if you have questions as folks are sharing, please, we're getting a little informal, it's lunchtime. Raise your hand, we will certainly clarify with folks. Do I have a volunteer that would like to kick, oh, thank you, would like to kick us off, I appreciate it. Let me grab that poster. There you are.
One thing that I noticed in looking at many of these is they involve the social sciences. So you mentioned the Portman Center, or people mentioned the Portman Center. I actually emailed the head and asked him if he wanted to come. Sorry if that was inappropriate. He said he was busy, but he wanted me to mention that, you know, they would like to be invited. If you guys don't know Rich Harknett, he works on data centers and policy. So I think that would be great to have social scientists and political scientists involved in this effort. And I think it would benefit many of us as well to be able to work with them. So, and it would also help us talk to our policymakers about what we're doing.
We get folks on the inside.
And talk to the public in general.
Thank you. Do you think I captured
the social services and political, or social sciences and political sciences involvement?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think my takeaway here is I think we emphasize quite a lot on research, but when I look at those institutes for like variety of names, they also have those educational programs for students. So like currently we have like chemists, so we train chemical students, chemistry students, engineers, engineering students. But I don't think UC has those joint programs to recruit students with a special emphasis with those so-called like sustainability as a major. I don't see that here yet. But I think if make that happen, probably requires a fundamental change in our curriculum. I don't know, but this is something I saw quite often from other such kind of centers we are aiming for. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. So research paired with educational programs, right? Specifically for recruitment of talent, but also, my goodness, wouldn't that
Yeah.
strengthen the educational program too if it's directly applicable to?
But I read some news, like not here, but in other countries, like from UK, some universities they are canceling the chemistry majors for undergraduate students. So that's alarming to me. So
What's the downstream effect, right? Oof. Okay, thank you, thank you. And do we have a follow-up question, or are we jumping around? Okay, please, we'll jump around, I'm fine with that.
One of things I like was from the center was action-oriented research. So that is where they brought in experts from different disciplines and went to the community and working with communities on the specific problems people were concerned about. And previous 2 points actually goes with that. It's like you take your students to the community, and again, the team of researchers were from all different disciplines as needed. So yeah, that's how I would put action-oriented research. That will go very well with the center as well. And
Thank you.
I think it's a theme across UC around the implementation piece that, like, yes, if you want to just learn for the sake of knowing, great. But like ultimately we want this to impact our lives and to impact our communities in that positive way. So I appreciate you calling that out, right? What is this actually leading to? And again, I think that's been the theme of our conversation of how are we going to put this into action and implement that. But I also love this piece around working with communities on the problems that matter to them, right? Again, we don't have to incentivize as much when people are already interested in the work. Yeah.
in our SWOT analysis, I saw that one of the threats was OSU. And OSU has a really good, strong sustainability and resilience center. I saw them.
I love it. Thank you. Here, I'll go around. So I'm not just keeping. Sorry, Lila. Thank you. All right. Perfect. All right, James, please.
One of the things that stuck out to me was something that we're going to have to really think about. There are some institutes that said, this is what we do, and they just named it. So water is what we do, and they just named it, and others are comprehensive. And so the decision that I think brought to the forefront is it one thing that we do, or is it comprehensive? And that's a challenge. And I'd be interested to know how each one of these institutions decided on, no, we're not going to do everything. We're going to do this thing, and that's just what it is. Or, yeah, we are going to do everything because we can't decide what we want to do. So we're just going to grow it to do whatever it ultimately winds up being.
Did you have any reflections as you were learning that about benefits or challenges to either one of them?
Yes, so the benefit is the same challenge to the same side of the same quarter. It's identity. So if I'll use, I'm looking at Arizona. So I identify as a water resource center, which means that people who see themselves as a water resource, they identify me, and that's where I'm going to go. But then I miss opportunities in anything else that's not water. So I said, sustainable manufacturing. I'm not gonna go to a water resource, even if they evolved into it, even if later on they did it. That's who you are. That's how I've always known you as. It's hard to change brands, so that's it. If it's the Ohio State Sustainability Institute, okay, maybe if I'm water and this other thing, but if you disappoint me too many times, then I'm gonna stop coming to you because every time I come to you, you can't solve my problem. So why do I ever come to you? So I'm not gonna come to you anymore because I don't know who you are. So
Identity.
Yeah, thanks. So the two things that stood out to me when I was looking at these other groups are things that both Pravin and James brought up. One, to me, it seemed like there was this tension between, James called it comprehensive versus kind of like focused. To me, it was almost more like the comprehensive ones I was looking at is, oh, it's like a shell, right? It's like an overall shell umbrella for all these other kind of smaller things, right? Versus ones that are more like the Texas Water Resources Institute, to me, seemed very focused, very action-oriented. They worked on community-related problems, almost more like extension kind of a thing. So there's sort of this shell versus this like focused action-oriented thing. I don't know how you can be an overall shell comprehensive thing and still be very action-oriented. I think that's a real tension. The other thing that stood out to me, you know, as James pointed out with his last comment, if you don't know what you are and what you deliver, then people are going to be disappointed when they come to you. And to me, that starts to get at this almost like a greenwashing type word, right? Where you say you do sustainability, but what does that really mean? What do you really do? And when I was looking at the Illinois and the Ohio State ones, I kind of had this thing where I was like, why, what do you really do? What are you really? And I think that's always a risk when you develop something as broad as Sustainability Institute.
Yeah, there's folks that, you know, oh, you say enough, I'm just gonna give you $1 billion. That sounded right, but then like, who really has the mechanisms to do the work, right? So thank you for that. I put the tension between umbrella over multiple foci versus focus action oriented. Unclear identity leads to disappointment or unmet expectations, right? I think that's foundational.
I think I may have a solution to that problem. So it's a merger of two concepts. You have an umbrella, which could be sustainability or resilience. And then you have verticals. These are the pillars of focus. And then think about cross-cutting things. For example, you can have wet chemistry showing up in 3 pillars or 3 verticals. You can have data science cross-cutting all of it. So if we think of it as almost a home with floors and supporting structures that are verticals, and then the roof is the umbrella. So if we think of it that way, I think we get all of the best of all worlds in that regard. So there is a place for everybody.
Did you have any benchmarking observations you want to share while you have the microphone?
Well, actually, it was something I was looking for and I didn't see. I'm not sure how are these institutions, how did they start funding-wise? In some of them, you have a clear indication that this is a seed from NSF, for example, then that the institution grew to be something bigger than the seed. In other cases, it could be a big donation. In some other cases, they don't even talk about it. So my question to ourselves is what that financial structure, the seed, is going to look like to begin with, and how is it going to evolve? What is the sustainability plan to take this institution out indefinitely, or move it, evolve it indefinitely?
This is also about benchmarking, kind of following up Lily's comment. I think a consistent funding flow to the institute is very important. You know, once the institute or center is established, it burns money quickly. You know, the facilities, equipment, personnel, administration, etc. All of this would require a large amount of money. You know, I stayed at the Yale Energy Sciences Institute for a few years as a postdoc before I came here. And I know how much money was burned each month, each year. And they had very consistent donation each year, millions of dollars. So that's why the Yale Energy Science Institute can last over 10 years. Of course, they also get money from NSF or DOE, but I don't think the money from these funding agencies is enough to support the real expenses there. So if we're thinking about the funding source for the institute or center that we're going to establish, we really need to think about the funding source, as Lily mentioned. James Mack already mentioned, UC support, right? But what other sources can we look for? Yeah, this is my comment.
Thank you so much. Endowment, okay. Yeah, we basically need a diversified approach to this because we don't want to just rely on one. I mean, I know I'm saying things you already know, but just saying the things to not make assumptions, right? That we could have a really lovely person that wants to donate every year and then they change their mind, right? Or we can have really great grants and then grant funding cycle ends, or question mark about the future of political environments in our systems, right? I don't know. We have a change coming up. So I think it's really important that we have enough to cover if something goes away, right? We all know the contracts and how difficult it might be to fill a position that's not finite or that's not infinite, right? And so how can we make sure that as we're trying to seek out this talent, we have the resources to support them staying? Thank you. Other benchmarking, who has not shared and wants to share? Not to pressure. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I should do my job, share. Well, I know about a couple of these places, and I know about the University of Arizona Water Resources Center, and they had a few amazing faculty, world-class faculty that all do something very similar. And they just added Manu Lal, who's like my superhero crush, favorite professor. He left Columbia University and went to join the University of Arizona Water Resources Center. They added him to a team that had like, he's number one or whatever, and they added him to a team that had like the 4th and 5th best already. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are places that are maybe thinking that we need to have a real concentration of a number of amazing people that do something very similar so they can actually work together effectively. And maybe it takes a really special culture that encourages faculty to, safe spaces, to trust each other, to work together well, to somehow not step on each other's toes. But yeah, when you see Manu Lal, like, go join these guys you're like, I already know 3 awesome people that are there. You think, well, holy cow, I don't know what we are, but that's an institute, right? Like you guys have like everybody. So maybe we need to think a little bit like that and say, we are going to have something that we're really good at, and we're going to recruit, really the top people that we can possibly recruit and get 3 of them. That now you have now you got something. Now you have a critical mass of awesomeness. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that's shifting paradigms around what folks are looking for. Like, how do we make it an appetizing environment for you to come in and potentially not be the best? I mean, like, when you're talking about 3rd, 4th, 5th, I'm probably going to an institution where I get to be number 1. And so what is it about you get to still be challenged that you might be number 1, but we're going to do even better in collaboration? And it does, I think, have some tension with faculty processes, right? With research about what you put your name on, what you get your dollars for, how we share the resources. And so I think it goes back to that institutional support that for us to really collaborate in the way we need to not be focused on scarcity, right? We need to not be thinking about, well, you can't have that assistant because I need them, right? Thank you.
Thanks. I had been sort of working around in my head a few thoughts that I think work well as a follow-on to that, which are more abstract than responding to any particular of the benchmarking examples that we're working with. But I'm assuming, so I'll highlight my assumption because we're trying to be careful about assuming, but about assumptions. I'm assuming that whatever kind of entity we're talking about here at UC, it's not going to be sort of a primary academic affiliation for the main faculty involved, that this is going to be a cross-college kind of collaborative initiative that bridges across different colleges, different academic homes. And so I think especially if that assumption is accurate, I suspect a challenge and opportunity is to try to figure out the recipe such that contributing faculty, and this echoes something that you just emphasized in Patrick's comments, but such that contributing faculty sort of are comfortable being one of several versus the boss, right? Because we're all kind of enculturated into this circumstance where we are rewarded for being the top person who runs the show, right? You have your lab, et cetera. So what is the motivation for people to sort of be one of several? And how that works in the kind of even like day-to-day of relationship building with community organizations, et cetera. So the Center for Public Engagement of Science, of course, is a much lower key, smaller kind of faculty-driven thing. But this has been, for me, in trying to figure out what the recipe is over years, one of the big challenges is how to get strong faculty affiliates who add a lot to Pews. And I think that Pews is benefiting too, sort of willing to be part of that versus like build their own thing over here. And then, sorry, I'm kind of going on for too long, but one associated thought I think also, which would be important for the kind of scale of initiative that we're talking about, would be to try to figure out something that, and this goes back to the like particular focus versus umbrella, trying to figure out a recipe for something that can survive changes in faculty, right? So one of the real problems with developing lasting community relationships that I've seen is these tend to be focused, driven by individual faculty, sometimes even individual graduate students. And it seems like we can anticipate that as we cultivate, the #1 expert in, fill in the blank, multiple things, I'm sure, at this institute, sometimes we're gonna lose somebody. And so how is the identity sort of robust against faculty loss and sort of sensitive to that? Okay.
I want to just mention just very briefly, HR, okay. We just went through a process of trying to brand like the employee value proposition. And we had a kind of conversation about like, what are the concepts? And one of them was like, come here and make your path. Can we stop telling people that, okay? So we actually landed on the concept of mutualism. And this idea that you see is a living, breathing organism and you are a part of this body. And, and so I think just even at our level, we're trying to shift the culture of what are we promising folks and how can we make sure we're aligning with Next Lives Here and what we're asking of folks to really collaborate in new ways, right? Thank you.
I just want to piggyback off of what Angela said. So she opened the door, so I'm just going to go through it. Culture change is I would say the absolute hardest aspect of doing this. And so if we're really real about it, we live in a world in our own disciplines, I'll throw chemistry under the bus, where our success metrics is you published in that specific chemistry journal. And if you didn't publish in that specific chemistry journal, then clearly you didn't do the thing we needed you to do. And so you can't be the top of your field because you didn't publish in that specific chemistry journal. When we start doing things like this, you're going to be publishing in various different journals, not that specific chemistry journal. So then the resource allocation could then go to this person doing this high level thing. And then everybody else goes, but they didn't publish in that specific journal. It's not fair. Now we have the it's not fair conversation. And now we're wasting time talking about how unfair it is that this person got this thing. So guess what we're not doing is talking about sustainability and anything else, because now we're talking about this is not fair and that's not fair and this other thing's not fair and how come they got this and that. That's got to stop if we're actually going. We got to focus in on the problem at hand, and some of the other cultural aspects is going to have to alleviate itself. And so an interesting example from a university's perspective is Angela talked about being the top in your field. So we're at the University of Cincinnati where there's a lot of people who's really, really high in their field. I'll use chemistry as an example. And there's some historian that's at the top of their field, and they're probably the best historian and one of the best that's there, and we have them in our college. And we'll go to the same thing. I was like, I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what value you have or anything like that because you don't publish in my journal. So I have no clue. I don't know how important it is. I don't know what you do, nor do I care. That has to change also. So if we're going to value people for the things of making impact, then it can't be too, the metrics of success can't be so narrowly focused, quite frankly, as our RPT criteria, basically.
No, I think that's so important to name, right? Again, from the HR perspective, we're thinking about consistent employment across, right? Staff enrichment pathway. How do we have a consistent experience of staff? But I don't know if we can ever get to that, right? It is the tension of centralization versus decentralization. And Lilith, to your point, the only way to have an umbrella like that is to have strong pillars and not expect everyone to be in their umbrella all the time, right? And so we're grappling with this every day, the tension of, yes, there should be consistency of policies, procedures, application, but what does innovation look like if we're so tied to these policies? Like if we can't update and flex them as needed, right? Thank you for naming that. Other ideas, other benchmark thoughts? This is a great conversation. Let me just recap. So we talked about themes of social sciences and political sciences, research paired with educational programs, action-oriented research with communities on problems that matter to them. Some are focused versus comprehensive. We talked about this idea of maybe an umbrella with those pillars. Unclear identity leads to disappointment or unmet expectations. So again, just that thought about how do I identify ourselves and what's going to serve us. We need a consistent flow of money, potentially an endowment or other funding streams to make sure the work's sustainable. World-class faculty. Do we need a concentration of experts doing similar work, right? Beyond just this concentration of experts, but very closely aligned is maybe what I heard the work that folks were doing. Assuming that it's not mainly housed in academic spaces, so more collaboration between the colleges, like one college isn't going to necessarily own this. Contributing faculty wanting to be one of several. So what is the motivation? Again, to maybe shift the paradigm around the culture of being a faculty member. We want to create work that can survive the change in players. So it's very challenging. Most people invest a lot more if their name's on it, but how can we make sure that they're also willing to leave it in a good place for someone else to pick it up, right? So it can continue. And culture change is the most challenging. How do we have that consistency while also staying flexible? So any other thoughts about what you saw as you reviewed or what you were looking for that you didn't see as you reviewed? Because I know there was a question about like, where are these folks getting their funding or what started that seed of the program? Anything else we can learn from our benchmarking institution? Okay. Well, y'all have been doing a fantastic job. My goodness, we've gotten through a lot of energy today. Now, this is my real question for Pat. If y'all are ready to jump into your section around action items, action planning. Fantastic. So if y'all are ready, let's hear back about kind of how this is all going to come together.
I don't know if it's going to come together, but you'll get out early. So one thing is not to keep you just because we have the time. So a couple of things. First, again, Tina, thank you for facilitating today. Let's give Tina a round of applause. Yeah. And Heather, thank you for also helping organize everything and supporting everything. And I want to thank all of you again for making the time to come here and be a part of this, have the conversation. Jen, Jim, and I were back there talking about sort of what we have been hearing you say, noticing what we didn't hear you say. And so some of the things I just want to leave this group with include, you know, when we think of an institution as complex as UC, and I know, James, you were talking about your culture piece, which James does very well. One of the things I've learned from the president, when we think of impact, right? In the end, we're not going to survive as an institution without impact. And I think Patrick brought up the fact that, you know, there are a lot of higher ed institutions that are struggling and their value proposition, all of us in higher ed are being challenged by that. But, you know, our impact comes through our educational mission, right? Developing talent, training talent. Our impact also comes through our service. What do we do? How do we interact? Community is a big piece of that. And our impact can be in our research as well. And I think research-wise, maybe we tend to focus a little bit when we get too STEMish is, well, it's got to be a product, or it's got to be a technology, or it's got to be some new, fundamental understanding. But I heard a lot today of impact can also be beyond that. It's in the policy realm. It is in how we interact with the communities that we coexist with. It is how do we help make an impact in our NGOs and other partners that we have. What we're going to do as a group, meaning leadership in the Office of Research, is certainly take all this learning and what you shared about, your passions, what you shared in terms of what you see as the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, what you've been sharing out here as part of the benchmarking, and put all that together, not only for your information, also for those who couldn't be here, but for me to also start sharing this with the provost and other people in senior leadership so that they understand sort of where the conversation is as an institution. But I think most importantly for us, when I say us, it would be Jennifer and myself, is we're going to be following up with requests for additional information. As we start thinking about this, I will say one of the things, and I think it started to come up probably in your benchmarking, that I want to emphasize when we're talking about a space like a BioFutures building, the key to that is the applied side of that. It's the application space. It is what problem are we solving? And I'll just use an example. I know one of the opportunities that was listed is, we have a lot of chemical industries around here. We have a lot of other institutions. But if we just focus on the industry piece, for example, and Jim being a former UC grad and someone who lived and worked in that space, do we know what the biggest problems are for those industries? Do we have the capabilities to start saying, yeah, we could come together and start helping them solve those problems? So it's not just, it's an opportunity, but do we really understand what their problems are? Are we pitching to them, we have solutions, and they are like, that's not our problem? We shared with you the pre-read, and I know Vadim brought it up. There is a problem with these data centers, right? They will consume lots of energy and lots of natural resources. That problem's been stated. Is there an opportunity for us to say, hey, how do we get people together so that we can create a center that is going to address those specific types of problems? To the point, and I know it's listed up there, when an institute is less focused, it's a lot harder as an administrator to argue for resources when it's very clear. Because, many of you know this, but just as a reminder, when you go to the Board of Trustees, they think in their hats as, I work at, P&G, I work at Great American, I work at name whatever field they're coming out of, and they think, how is this going to help my company be better? So one of the things we will be following up is, and I want you to start thinking about, is what are the more specific problems that you really see? And from hearing from other people, we have an opportunity to bring some people together and say, let's tackle this problem. I'm gonna not pick on Pravin and Amanda, but the built environment, can we narrow that down? The built environment could be big, but what's a specific problem in Cincinnati that we could come around and say, address this? We could get a group that starts addressing this. I think that's what's helped. I guess what I'll share is my learning in working with the faculty in Digital Futures, where there's not one faculty member in charge. There's a group of people, but what made that work for them was starting to hone in on, here's the specific problem, we're going to be working on here, and here are the people we're going to be working in partnership with to address that problem. And that has been very successful for the folks that are in this building. So expect to see a request for additional information. Also, you know, be thinking from your own perspective. I know it was brought up numerous times. Who do you know that could have been here or should have been here, or you would like to have been here that wasn't? We want to collect that information as well. If you know of specific contacts or individuals outside of the university that, you know, again, this is gathering as much information for us in the leadership to sort of put together some proposals on how we could move forward. I would say, as I look at it, and we'll get your feedback on this as part of our post-meeting, post-retreat survey, but do we want to make this just UC focused? I know the regional idea came up, or should we be thinking for some of these, don't make it UC focused, let's make it bigger than that. And here are some people we need to start talking to. Those types of things, everything right now is still, right, we're in the early design phase of what programs of research and focus would be in terms of these particular areas. I think the last thing that's important is, and we live this experience, and I know it's been talked about, if there is a space in BioFutures to house these types of research centers, institutes, collaborations, whatever it might be, would you be willing to relocate from where you are to that place? Because it's a real thing, and we know it, and you know, it's not something, it's not successful if people only come over one day a week to check in and see how things are going. So be honest with us on that. Jen, is there any other information that we're going to ask for that I missed covering? Okay. But, you know, most importantly, take your conversations from today, you can take them back to your colleagues. Some of you, I think, made new connections, didn't know other people were doing anything. Take advantage of that because this is certainly very helpful, and I'm very appreciative for all the learnings that we got out of this, but I hope you can take something out of this too, either back to your home unit or to others that you know and say, hey, there may be an opportunity. We should start talking about it. I know you weren't there, but let me tell you a little bit about that. But with that, again, I appreciate you, appreciate Tina for everything. Go ahead. I'm sorry, man. Yep.
Thanks, Pat. So I guess just one thing I'll mention, you know, since there's this link between a potential new building, right, and then this group of faculty, right, this new institute, whatever it's going to be, I would challenge you in thinking about this space to really think about it as like a lead by example, a living lab type thing. And if we're going to build a brand new building, right, and we're going to say sustainability somewhere related to that building, it should be a truly sustainable building, right? Like it should be something where we can go and demonstrate that we're really like leading by example. So I'll just put that bug in your ear. Yeah.
No, I love that idea, and we had some challenges with Digital Futures because it's not a UC building, and it was built and we're leasing this space, but thinking about that living lab concept is a great one because there's so much that can be done. And the other thing, I think for me, it's obvious, but I just want to point out part of the way we see it, and we heard lots of, you know, talk of we need data science, we need all that to be part of this. If the building's right next door, you've got capabilities that already exist over here and lots of synergies that could exist between that. But the idea for UC to lead in sustainability, I know the person who puts on and hosts and does all the work for Sustainability Week would love to be able to point to all her partners that she brings in that we're actually doing that. So thank you for that comment. Any other last thoughts? Sure.
Sorry, just remind me, is this the Institute of Biofutures? I can't remember what you said at the beginning.
Biofutures is
That's the name of the building? Okay. 'Cause Biofutures to me sounds like a hospital building. I don't know if I would be associated with that. Like, that sounds like a biomedical building to me. You know? That doesn't make sense for me to join a Biofutures program in my mind. Okay, just to be clear about that. Okay, good.
Biofutures building, like President likes digital futures, likes urban futures, likes biofutures, Jen likes everything future.
Could it be Enviro Futures though, or something like?
Well, it's
Yeah, because the bio thing is just so bio.
Bio does, it really does immediately get bio smell.
yeah.
It's hard for me to plug in bio.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, yeah. Melvin.
Thanks. So I know you guys have different perspective of the biofutures. So to me, the biofutures is including the sustainable, could be potentially biomanufacturing, and also bioeconomic. As could be very broad, including the water, energy, usage. So in that perspective, do have the environmental component and also so the economic impact inside of that concept. Thanks.
Yeah, I imagine we're faculty, we could all debate, just like in faculty meetings. But that's good. These are very good points. So if there's nothing else, again, thank you all very, very much for being here. And I wish you a good rest of your afternoon and rest of the week. So thank you.